Okay, so let's look at the Texas problem. And again, it's not really a problem. So in 1821, Mexico had declared their independence from Spain, and they were going to be their own country, and we like that. And meanwhile, American settlers decide that they are going to immigrate to Texas and take the land from Mexico and create a new slave state because that's what we do. So, after the Adams-Onis Treaty had been signed, the Spanish government had been encouraging Americans to come to that area of Texas. And so, a lot of this is because there weren't a lot of white settlers in that Texas region at the time, and the Comanche Empire that we are westwardly pushing is threatening the Texas Empire, and the Mexican farmers and ranchers who live there are having these issues with the Comanche Empire. And so the Spanish government says, hey, why don't you bring some settlers out here and we can help each other out. We can deal with these Comanche problems and you can have some land. And so they come up with this program for the empresarios. And an empresario is somebody who will bring a settler to the land, and in exchange for bringing settlers onto the land, they're going to get a land grant from the government. And so one of our famous empresarios is Moses Austin. And so he asks for permission to settle 300 English-speaking Americans in Texas. And Spain says, yeah, sure, on one condition. Your settlers have to convert to Roman Catholicism because Spain is Catholic, and that's a very well-known concept. Like English is Anglo Protestant, and Spain is Roman Catholic. And if you're going to bring those settlers into Spanish territory, they're going to have to convert. So he brings these people over, and in 1821. Moses Austin is dying, and his son Stephen is going to take over his empresario goal here of bringing those 300 people in. And so Mexico has freed themselves from Spain at this point, and they're going to allow Stephen Austin to take over his father's land grant because they want to encourage settlement within this region. But Mexico also passes colonization laws that are going to allow for immigration, but with stipulations. So, once Spain is out of the picture, thousands of Americans start to move into this territory. Now, most of these Americans are from slaveholding states, and they end up outnumbering the Tejanos that are already there, because they realize that the soil in Texas is really good for cotton. And so they start to move into the territory to farm cotton and to expand the institution of slavery. And Mexico allows this because, unlike the Homestead Act in the United States, where you have to pay a minimum filing fee for the land, the Mexican government will let you pay in installments. You don't have to put any money down right away. There's no minimum purchase. You can just buy some land in Mexico and pay the Mexican government in installments to own this land. And again, you also have to remember that white Americans do believe that it's our manifest destiny to take this land and also to populate the land. And so, again, it sounds like a nice little deal at the time, but things do not work out very well for the Texans very shortly after, which again you will find is a very common trend here. So Texas is now settled by mostly white people from the slaveholding states of the United States, and these new settlers are very unhappy with the Mexican government and the Mexican requirements of the territory that they have just taken over. So these are American people, United States citizens, who moved into a country that was governed by a whole different country and have decided that they don't like those laws, so they're not going to follow them, which makes about as much sense as you moving to China and then deciding, well, you don't like the Chinese laws, so you're not going to follow them. Here we are, though. So one of the very first things they do is refuse to convert to Catholicism. They just ignore that. Well, I'm not converting. Like, you can't make me change my religion. They're also upset with the Mexican justice system. They don't like the way the justice system of Mexico works out. And probably the final nail in the coffin for these settlers is that Mexico abolished slavery in 1829. And they want slavery because they want to use this land to farm cotton. That's probably the biggest reason they're there. And so American settlers in Texas decide they're going to start to push for Texas to leave Mexico and become its own independent nation that will be part of the United States. So really, they want to become a United States, but they're operating at first under this idea that Texas should be its own country. The Republic of Texas, right? So, again, this unfounded belief of white supremacy pushes forward this idea that we have the right to undermine the Mexican government and take the land. And so this comes up for the first time when an impresario tries to evict people who have settled on the land that he bought. And Mexico says, well, we're just going to get rid of your land grant. So it's not your land anymore. That was a logical answer, in my opinion. But it is not a logical answer for this man, and he is very, very upset. And so outrage spreads through the area that the Mexican government is not allowing the white settlers to keep the land that they rightfully bought from the Mexican government. And how dare they? And so this little group takes a prisoner. It's like the town mayor, but they're not really mayors because not that type of situation. But he takes a prisoner who is like a mayor. And the Mexican army comes in to deal with this. And in response, this group of men declare themselves a republic. They're not part of Mexico. They're not part of Texas. They're not part of the United States. They are the Republic of Fredonia. And our old friend Stephen Austin decides that it's going to be his job to help. So he sends some of his men down to help fight off the Mexican army. But unfortunately, the revolt collapses and the revolutionaries leave Texas, but they leave angry. And due to this, in 1830, Mexico decides they've had enough, and they forbid future U.S. immigration to Texas and increase their military presence in Texas. So, as you can imagine, this goes about as well as you would think, and settlers just sneak over the border. So, in 2025, the government yells about people crossing the border illegally, but in 1830, people were crossing the border illegally into Mexico. Like, continuity and change, you guys. These settlers cross illegally into Mexico, and so by the time Mexico reopens immigration to Texas 5 years later, there are 20,000 Anglo-Americans in Texas. So, you're definitely on the up and up when it comes to setting good examples. So in 1832, while American immigration is banned, there is a group of Anglo-American settlers who are still in Texas, and they demand, imagine going to another country and then demanding that it meet your needs, not what they're telling you it is. They demand that Mexico suspend customs duties for them. They demand that Mexico resume immigration. They demand that Mexico grant the promised land titles back, and that they create the independent state of Texas. And Mexico says, sure, why not? We'll write a new constitution. Sounds great. Let's do it. Except that's not really how it goes, but that's a different story or a different time. Like in the next 5 minutes, so follow up.